Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I am back with another Are You In? Tonight we are taking a look at the newest Leprous album entitled Pitfalls. I've talked about this band previously with my brother, but if you don't know who this band is, they are a progressive metal slash avant-garde slash experimental rock band from Notodden, Norway. I am not going to even try to pronounce the names of these people, but their previous albums include Tall Poppy Syndrome in 2009, Bilateral in 2011, Cole in 2013, The Congregation in 2015, and Melina in 2017. This is a band that my brother got me on by listening to one of their singles from their previous album, From the Flames. I really enjoyed Einar's singing. I really enjoyed the change of time signatures throughout the song, and it had a really solid guitar line. Checked out the album and immediately fell in love with it. This band is very prog, but it's also very experimental, doing a lot of different ideas with time signatures and creating some really interesting arrangements. Melina, a beautiful song with some really interesting drumming. The Last Milestone, an absolutely beautiful closer with no drumming whatsoever. It's mostly just violin, but some better, harder songs like Bombville, From the Flames, Illuminate, Leashes, Mirage, and Captive. So many really solid songs that it stood out to be one of my favorite albums of 2017. What also really stood out, other than Einar's beautiful singing, some of the best singing that I've heard in the metal field in a very long time, but also Baird's drumming. He has become instantly one of my most underrated drummers that I can think of. What he does drumming adds so much intricacy and so much more layering to sometimes very simplistic and slow-burning arrangements. The drumming on Mirage is absolutely incredible. The drumming on Melina adds so much to that very rubato song. Even Illuminate, with the change of pace at the end, is super cool. This was a band that I got to see in concert, and it was phenomenal. I've gone back to their earlier works, and it's a little bit heavier, but I still enjoy a lot. The Congregation, fantastic. Cole, really solid as well. From what I understand, Melina is a kind of a change of pace for this band. This was the first album that didn't have any harsh vocals on it, and it was a lot softer than previous albums. I still really liked it, though I understand that it was very controversial for other people. Following this pattern of them dropping an album every 2 years, they did it again with Pitfalls, and this was something that came out of nowhere to me. My brother didn't even know that this was coming out. I gave him a call and he was like, what the hell, this is coming out? This is incredible. I've read some reviews about this album and I have seen it being very polarizing. It gave me a little bit of a pause because of how all over the board this album has been received. Still, I knew I was going to listen to it. I knew I was going to review it. I was wishing to do it with my brother, but unfortunately our schedules didn't mesh up. Maybe we'll be able to talk about it at some other point in time, but for now I gotta do this on my own. The biggest thing I can say first about this album is it's a change in sound completely from previous albums. But this isn't something that's completely out of left field. This album does a lot more on the experimental side, a lot more on the softer side. One might even say it's a little bit more poppy and mainstream, but you hear ties from what Melina was to where this is now. The best word that describes a lot of this album is pensive. There are a lot of slow burning songs on here. You're not getting a lot of in-your-face, fast-paced songs like you did on any of the previous albums. This is the slowest of burns. There's a lot of slow layering of ideas and a lot of slow momentum. However, on that vein, it's all really good. This is the type of slow burn where you may not notice it at first, but if you just let it sit there, it is going to engulf you, and in the best way possible. Another reason why I say this is very pensive is because of a lot of the lyrical ideas on here. I think Pitfalls works perfectly as a title of this album. A lot of these songs are dealing with being in your head and either trying to escape your past or try to be better with your mindfulness so that you don't fall into the same pitfalls. When this album is at its best, it's doing a lot of really simplistic things over a expanded period of time with a great payoff. Observe the Train, my favorite song on the album, is probably one of the more poppy songs on the album, but there's a huge payoff. What I love about this song is just how it builds throughout. You start off with this very simplistic chime and marimba melody, it sounds like, and you get a little bit of drumming, but it's mostly just on the snare, and it lets off after a few hits. What stands out though is Einard's singing. Phenomenal. It's absolutely delicate. There's a lot of solid falsetto from him on this song, and it's really legato. There isn't a lot to the melody itself other than the fact that because of how it's shaped, it's a lot of the very similar notes but different chords around it, making for a really, really simple yet surprisingly effective experiment. Then as we go on, you add the full entire band, some more solid drumming, guitar parts, and what is a pretty standout bass line. Even though it is simplistic, again, it's very melodic, especially with some parts where it jumps between octaves. Really effective and stands out on this song. What also is phenomenal is the chorus. Absolutely the best one on the album. Adds so much momentum. The chord progression is gorgeous, and the bass line adds some more momentum to this as well. I love how it builds to the end with strings, and it's honestly one of the best layered songs on this album. Another one that's really solid as well is Distant Bells. This was a little bit of a more slow burn. You start off with this piano part, and it keeps overlaying other piano parts onto it, making for more complex ideas even in that first minute. Another really, really solid melody line, especially when you get to the chorus of "And I've been around for all these years." It's very jazzy. It feels like it could fit perfectly like a jazz ballad. It keeps adding intensity with the whole entire band coming in, with strings coming in, and eventually, about halfway through, you finally get the drums coming in. This is a really cool example of how Baird brings so much by doing so little. This drum part starts with really fast-paced hits on the side of a snare drum, and it is a little bit glitchy, and it stops for a second and then comes back in. And then eventually that whole entire drum line comes in with this really, really fast pace and kind of like electronic drum idea. That itself is so interesting to listen to, and it stands out for being so simplistic yet so effective. And then eventually you get into the whole entire band bringing a lot more energy, more hard rock metal sounding. This is where you finally get that climax that is incredible from Einar, going up the octave and just being so effective. The outro is a little bit poppy, but you kind of saw that coming from the beginning when you hear the oh, 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 oh. It doesn't make for the best outro, but that whole entire ride is just incredible to listen to. Below is also another slow burn that starts off being a little bit more electronic and glitchy. It feels a little bit weird at the beginning, but it becomes more effective as the song goes on when you get to that chorus. For those who were in my jazz a cappella group, so that's going to be a very finite amount of people, the chorus melody reminds me of a song called Gotha, which was another Scandinavian Norwegian song. So I don't know if there's a tie between there, but this idea of la 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 la. It's a really interesting chorus line, but weirdly enough, I've heard it before. What I really enjoy is the heaviness of that part, where it's slow, it's very sparse in nature, but you just feel the heaviness there. And then eventually Bayard comes in with a little bit more of a bouncy, jazzy drum line, which feels a little bit weird, but it changes up the pace of this song for the better. And then you get to another chorus, and it picks up more with the heaviness with a really solid guitar line as well. This is a song that isn't great at the beginning, but once you get past that first verse, it becomes a phenomenal listen. And the apex of the song is worth the wait. At the bottom, another slow burn that starts off a little bit shakily to me. The contrast between the brighter verses and then the heavier chorus in a different key center isn't really effective, at least to me, at the beginning. If you can get past the first chunk of this song, it rewards you with a much better bridge and a phenomenal outro. The rest of the band picks up a little bit more. There's this really chugging and really interesting rhythmic guitar line, some beautiful string parts, and the drumming just gets absolutely hectic. It's the best drumming on the album. One problem I have with this particular song, it just feels like once you get to that second chorus, by the way that they drop out everything, it feels like this song is going to be ending right then and there. I'm happy that there was more afterwards, but it's a little bit harder to get into this one as, say, Below. Still, a really solid ride if you let it happen. Rounding out my favorites, we have Alleviate, which is the shortest song on the album and the most poppy, but it is still really effective. If I heard more mainstream songs like this, I would be super happy. The sparse ideas on the guitar and bass, the solid hand drumming in the second verse, the absolutely gorgeous chorus line of "All I could do in the end was wait." Absolutely stunning. And once you hit that final chorus, it ramps up that intensity and that beautiful edge to it. My biggest problem with this particular song is it feels a little bit cliche to do that last chorus the way that it did. I wish there was a little bit more of a build. However, it's still a really interesting and solid song to add to this collection. However, this album is not without its faults. First off, By My Throne, a really interesting beginning. It is one of the cooler intros, and it makes me yearn for stuff from Melina. You have this guitar part that's in 17/4, where it kind of like breaks in the middle of 8.5 beats. But the drumming itself is in standard 4/4, which is really interesting contrast, and I really enjoy this guitar line. Then you get into the verse idea, and it becomes a little bit too repetitive without enough building throughout. There's also this really weird 80s vibe. It kind of reminds me for some reason of Vogue or any industrial 80s song that I can think of. I really enjoyed the drum beat, but it puts it in a weird place for me. The choruses, really solid, really great energy, some great harmonies, but there's just way too much repetition in the verses to get you excited for those choruses. I Lose Hope, another one of these songs that meanders a little bit too much. There are some interesting ideas on here, a really solid bass line, a really interesting guitar line layered above it, and I like the really simple yet effective drumming, but this song doesn't feel like it goes anywhere. It doesn't really leave a lasting impression to me. Foreigner and the Sky is Red, on the other hand, feels a little bit off in comparison to the rest of this album. Foreigner is the most straightforward song on the album, no building whatsoever. This feels like it could have fit on Melina. Not necessarily in the best way possible. This one has a very solid chorus, and the building of the intro really cool, especially the drumming. But the verse is really bland, it's really monotonous, and it just doesn't stand out at all. Luckily, it's only a 3-minute song, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but the whole entire song just feels really bland until you get to that chorus. It doesn't experiment well to me, and it's just really interesting that they put this song on here. I actually listened to one of their track-by-track videos about this, and a lot of what I'm saying, they actually were observant of this particular thing. Whether it's I Lose Hope that doesn't really have much momentum, or if it's Foreigner that feels a little bit more straightforward. And The Sky is Red as a closer, and I've really enjoyed the whole entire arrangement for the most part. It has some really solid drumming, really solid guitar lines, and it chugs along very well. The chorus has some really cool melody, rhythmic ideas, and even some really solid dissonant ideas. However, the verse melody is the worst on the album. It just feels bluesy for no reason, especially the way that Einar is singing it. It doesn't really work, especially when he's screaming it. When he's doing falsetto for it, it works a little bit better, but it's just not a really solid verse, and for the song to be 11 minutes long, it's kind of hard to get really into this song. Also, the ending of it, though interesting and builds solidly, especially when you have this part that just feels very rubato and you don't know exactly where the timing is until the full entire drumming comes in. That's cool. However, it doesn't need to be 5 minutes long. I think that's what destroys the momentum of this final song, and it's a shame because a lot of this album is super solid. It's not hitting necessarily all the highs of Melina, but it doesn't have to. This is a completely different idea that is so interesting in parts. There's a lot of songs that I come back to, Observe the Train, Distant Bells, Alleviate, Blow, that I know are going to be songs that need a little bit of momentum and a little bit of time to fully get into it, but once I am in, I am there. There's a line in Observe the Train that encapsulates this idea the best. On the chorus, there's a part that goes, let it flow, the change won't be radical, it's gradual. This isn't necessarily a radical idea. You see a lot of what they were doing here in Melina, just a little bit softer and a little bit more simplistic here. If you let it flow, then you'll be rewarded with some really solid songs and really memorable songs. I think that also works very well with the lyrics of this album, the idea of letting go of things in the past. Songs like Observe the Train, songs like Alleviate are talking about living in the present and letting everything happen rather than being stuck in your own head. And yes, that won't always work. You'll get times where you hit rock bottom, perfectly encapsulated at the bottom. You'll get points where you feel like you are different from who you want to be, like Distant Bells. You'll get pushback from the voices in your head or the doubting in your head, like Foreigner. You will hit highs and lows, like I Lose Hope. And there'll be points where you'll have to push back the pain and try to be better, like on Below. This perfectly encapsulates depression, perfectly encapsulates mental health issues. Like the process of grieving, like the process of working on mental health. The change is not radical, it's gradual. If you make the actions, if you let it flow, you'll be rewarded. That perfectly encapsulates what this album does. So for me, this is a full listen. Yes, there are parts where songs don't have enough momentum to be rewarding. And yes, there are some parts that feel a little bit too poppy or feel a little bit too long. However, a lot of these songs are really interesting and really worth the listen if you give it a chance. That is my time. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like or hate this album and your reasons why. Let me know other albums from 2019 you would like me to review. Share this with your friends. And most importantly, subscribe to my channel. That way I know that you enjoy what I'm doing and want to see this channel become bigger and better for the future. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another Are You In? Until then, this is a Music Fan, and I'm signing off.